Well, good evening, everyone, and welcome to Ask the Attorney, Season 2, Episode 2. I am Maya Engel, joined by our estate planning attorney, Mary Ann Wehr, based out of Northern Michigan. And Mary Ann, Happy New Year. I know we're kind of towards the end of January, but we haven't seen you since December, since last year.
Right. Happy New Year. It seemed, everything was kind of hectic after the first of the year. So we, just getting started now, I think is a great time.
Mhm.
And I'll tell you, I need a little reprieve from this weather.
Oh my gosh,
I
yes.
was trying to talk to Joe Charlevoix, but I saw his videos. So from Florida.
Yep. Joe went down to Destin, Florida to try to get away from the cold, and they got snow and cold temperatures down there as well, too. So sounds like a lot of us are experiencing some cold weather, but maybe our guest tonight is actually in a nice warmer spot. So with more on that, Mary Ann, would you like to introduce our guest?
I'd love to introduce our guest. And I have to say, he was pretty forward thinking and left the cold weather and is now in Arizona, right? Unlike those of us who are dealing with negative temperatures right now and icy roads. So at any rate, this is Jon Braddock. I think of him as a friend. I think of him as a very influential in the community, the larger community of estate planning attorneys and estate planning professionals. And as I've told you, I have a large network of people around the country. Mm-hmm. Jon is part of that network, and he's also part of helping build that network for me. So he's just got amazing stories. And so I think, Jon, I'll let you introduce yourself. I know you're an author, you're a podcaster, you've designed systems. I mean, you've done a lot in the area of estate planning. So I'll let you.
Well, thank you very much, Mary Ann, and thank you, Maya, for having me on tonight. It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you for your kind words. My background is actually, I was an employee benefit consultant for about 30 years, and then life happens. And losing a close family member who lived right up the street from us, it actually put me on a whole new path. And that was to get people to understand the importance of estate planning and why we need to be prepared and making things easier for families. And so, as you say, I'm a published author. I have a book called Click Here When I Die, which is my irreverent sense of humor on why people should actually plan. I'm the CEO and founder of My Life and Wishes, which is an online secure document storage and end-of-life planning platform that's used by people all across the globe, actually, but here in the U.S., predominantly used by estate planning attorneys like yourself, Mary Ann, who make this available through their work for their clients. And I'm the host of a podcast called Estate Planning Nightmares and How to Avoid Them. Which is probably what I enjoy the most, because I talk with wonderful estate planning attorneys from around the country, much like Mary Ann. We have fun conversations and we share stories. And some of the stories that I hear are nightmares. They have a lot of similarities, but they all have one thing in common. That is, they are all completely avoidable if people would simply plan. So
that sounds a lot like an episode that we did last year, Mary Ann. We talked about a lot of the do's and don'ts of estate planning and what can go wrong. And so it's interesting that you have a full podcast of all of the things that could go wrong. But just really, like you mentioned, Jon, highlights the importance of the work that attorneys like Mary Ann are doing.
Absolutely. Absolutely. The statistics, and I'm sure your listeners already know this, Mary Ann's talked about it, but, only about 50% of the people in the United States have done any planning, whereas 100% need to. And so, I look at my mission in life really as two things. One is to educate people that these are things that can happen. So often people will say to me, "Oh, I have time. I can plan for that later." And my response is, this is not taxes. We don't, we know the date of April 15th, right? But I don't have a crystal ball when I'm going to be here. And as I tell people, death is not just for old people. We see it every day, and it's unexpected. And some of the biggest tragic situations that I have seen and hear about are young couples with small children who have done no planning. There's guardianship issues, family fights that last, in some cases, a lifetime, where family members don't talk again, and probate issues that last years.
I think that's interesting that you bring up the young family. That is a passion of mine. It's hard to pull them into the office, right? Because it's time, they've got money, they need to spend their money in other places. There's a lot of other things going on. But the fact is, when you stop and think about it, and you have your most precious cargo is your children, and you haven't planned for them, that's a hard pill to swallow. And imagine if your child died, your brothers and sisters and his brothers and sisters and aunts and uncle, people are going to be wanting to raise those children and just cause more and more conflict. So
Yeah.
I think it's interesting you brought that group up. It's a hard one to reach, but
Well,
it's
I've seen
super
it.
prevalent.
Seen it happen. I have a son and daughter-in-law who are in their late 20s. I have my first grandchild from them who's just coming up on a year old. They live here in Arizona. Her family lives in Northern California. And, from the moment that child was born, I was pounding on him, you need a plan. I mean, God forbid something happens to the two of you. Do you want, her parents fighting with us and having the courts involved and trying to decide who is better capable? You need to make your wishes known for things like your children, things like your healthcare directives, when, giving you a voice when you don't have one, if you're incapacitated. And then finally, what to do, after you're gone, because for most families, when they lose a close family member, it is a nightmare. It is like a scavenger hunt on steroids, trying to track everything down, find the documents. Do they have life insurance? Where is it located? Where are all the assets located? What are the debt obligations? And I actually like to refer to it as the morbid scavenger hunt, because that's when my kids would have to show up at my house and dig through all of dead dad's drawers to try and find everything and make sense. And so that's why we created the Legacy Vault by My Life and Wishes, which is an online solution that's ultra secure, that if, God forbid, I didn't make it home tonight, my daughter in Florida would have access to everything she needs to know right now from anywhere on the planet.
I provide My Life and Wishes to all of my clients for the first, pretty much the first year until the 1st January, and then they're part of a client care package for me. People continue the client care package. I continue to provide My Life and Wishes, but it is I put everyone's documents there to begin with before I turn the thing over to them, and then encourage them to upload their statements, their information. People don't know who's the life insurance agent, the car insurance agent, the house insurance agent. You know what? If you die and you're the only one that owns that house is no longer insured. There are things that need to happen. So My Life and Wishes, I think, is an amazing tool. And I think that my clients really like it. There's some that have really embraced it. I have one person that is a security guru, like an IT security guru. They were a little uncomfortable until they tested the security, and he's like, it's it's as solid as it's going to be, right? So he felt comfortable uploading his information to it. I love the tool. I can see all kinds of benefits for it.
Sounds like it just makes things easier to have everything in one place that is easily accessible.
It is
Exactly.
easily accessible from anywhere, right? So
Yeah.
if your family wasn't in Arizona and they were in Michigan freezing, they could still get to it.
Exactly. Well, and as I say, our story was when my father-in-law died, and he lived right up the street from us. It took us nearly a year digging through boxes and things to try and track everything down and find where everything was located. And my Some Secrets Shouldn't Be Taken to the Grave story is we found a safe deposit box key with no identifying bank. And so we went to the two banks we absolutely knew he banked at. No box. Now, the man saved stuff, right? So imagine the 80-year-old man, been in the house for 40 years, his home office, he never threw anything away. It was a mess. So I'm starting to think, he probably had a box at one time, but he couldn't find the key when he went to close it, right? And so it got left behind. Well, my wife, she wasn't convinced. So she kept scratching at that itch. And so after 2 weeks of contacting every financial institution within the geographic area, she finds a box on the north side of the city that only he and the bank knew existed. And of course, he wasn't saying anymore. Inside that box was 752 paper shares of IBM stock.
Wow.
Yeah. And, the thing is, it's like, well, I have time. I'll make sure family knows where everything is located when it happens. And that's why there are, literally billions and billions of dollars in unclaimed assets that are floating around out there because people pass away and they haven't shared with family. And when we went through this experience, my first thought was, if something happened to me, my kids would not know who my attorney is, who my financial advisor is, accountant. They wouldn't know the banks I banked at, the kind of accounts I have. They wouldn't know if I had life insurance and where to find it. They wouldn't know if I had a trust or a will. They wouldn't know how to take down my 457 digital identities. All the things are on auto pay and recurring pay. And instead of them being able to, be sad and grieve, they'd be confused, stressed, anxious, frustrated, angry. Because they have to do all this heavy lifting. And so the reason we designed the platform is to really make things easier for those we love, to save that scavenger hunt.
And that really is the goal of creating an estate plan, is making things easier for your loved ones when you are gone. And like you mentioned, you just really never know when that could happen. Everyone wants to think, I'm going to live to 100. I have time to tell my family about all this. But let's be honest, that for most of us, we won't live that long, and you really just never know when it will be your time. So this is a question for both of you, Mary Ann and Jon. Would you say one of the biggest things that maybe holds people back from creating a plan is that thought of, I have time, I'm young, I'm not going to die anytime soon?
I think so. And I think that they think of it as, maybe it's easy to think of it as a heavy conversation. I'm talking about when I die. No one comes in my office and talks about when they die. I mean, we talk about their stuff, what they want to do with their stuff. We talk about their wonderful kids. We talk about the things that they want to help. But it's not about, of course you're preparing, right? But it's not, no one comes to my office. And the other day I had people taking selfies of me as they were leaving. So I think it's a reasonably good experience.
Yeah, it's funny. People do. I mean, no one wants to talk about death, right? Mortality. But, as I tell people, it's only death, lighten up. You're not going to be you're not going to be the first one. Near as I can figure it, human beings have been on this planet for about 300,000 years. And I'm pretty sure, I'm not a mathematician, but I'm pretty sure my odds of 1 out of 1 of us are pretty close, that we're not going to live forever, right? And so we need to think about it. It's not comfortable, but it's important that we do so. And, I remember being in my late 20s, I was immortal until I saw a couple of friends that I had gone to school with die in the late 20s. And then you start to realize immortality is, only for Superman, apparently. Exactly. So, and I'm not him. And the other thing that I hear from people too, Maya, which is really interesting, I'll have people say, well, it's bad luck. Talk about death.
Uh-huh.
And it's like, what do you mean? Well, if I talk and then plan for it, well, then it's going to happen. And it's like, and so here's my analogy. And I'm pretty sure I can say this on your live stream, but we talk about sex all the time. It does not make us pregnant. talking about death, I'm pretty sure is not going to make us dead. So, so therein, people, are all the excuses. You don't have a crystal ball. You're not going to live forever, and talking about it will not make you dead. Therefore, get your planning done.
Get your planning done.
Go see Mary Ann up there in the north. I mean, the roads are treacherous up there, from what I understand at the moment. So please make a plan.
Make a plan, or don't go to the grocery store. One of the two, right?
Yeah.
You can't stay away from the grocery store forever. Yeah, it is treacherous up here. And both of you know that I also had a life-changing event that brought me full circle into becoming so passionate about this practice area. And I have never been sorry. And I live every day for my son, who, by the way, was Superman, and he died at 33. So just proving that Superman and his wife was pregnant. And you know what? She needs to make a plan. I need to hook her up with another lawyer, not myself, but she needs to make a plan, because she is now a single mother of my grandson.
Right.
Got to do that. So it's just crucial. So Jon, one of the things that I think is interesting is your podcast, the topic of your podcast, and the topic of your book, Click Here When I Die, right? It kind of goes through in a humorous way, right? With some humor, but it goes through what has to occur at your death, and it's not pretty if you haven't planned. But I listen to your podcast, and I hear stories from lawyers who feel like not almost defeated, because they would have loved to have helped you a few years ago when you had capacity, and they could have helped you. Or is there any particular story that has just touched you, or there's so many of them?
Oh my gosh. Probably the hardest one was interviewed an estate planning attorney. It was a very similar situation like we talked about. It was a young couple. They both were actually coaches for a major university. They had 2 young children. They thought they were going to have time to do their planning. They were in a tragic car accident one night, hadn't done the planning. And there was a lot of family involved. Parents in 2 different states, aunts and uncles, initially the children, had to go to foster care because there weren't people right around and close to take care of them. And that fight lasted forever. And then the other one that really shocked me probably the most is, so a couple gets married. They're a younger couple. He hadn't met with an estate planning attorney or done any things. He owned the house when he and his wife got together. He died tragically. He hadn't changed any of his beneficiaries on his insurances. They were all to his brother. And his wife, now with young children, was not working. Here's the scenario. Other than a few assets that by state law that they were in would go to his wife, all the life insurances that he had, which were fairly significant, were going to the brother. The house, she was not properly titled on, but she was on the mortgage. So now she had to make house payments on a house that she didn't own, technically, at the time. And to make matters worse, she's selling the house, moving in with her parents, trying to find a job, and her brother-in-law not giving her a dime to take care of, his niece and nephew, right? And yeah, it's just shocking. And this stuff happens, which is why, probably the thing I enjoy the most is doing the podcast and hearing the stories, because I want people to hear the things that happen. And that is a nightmare situation. I couldn't imagine, someone dying and then realizing everything is going to your brother, and your brother's not giving anything to your wife or your children, and she is enduring massive hardship after losing, the one person that she counted on the most, all of which was so simple. You meet with an attorney. They will take you through the process. We'll make sure beneficiaries are the way they should be and things are updated. And we make sure that legal documents are in place and that you do own your home, and other things. Yeah, it was ugly.
Oh, that's just shattering, just a shattering story to think that I can't even put myself in her position. I can't even imagine. I just can't. So
I wanted to go find the brother-in-law.
Oh, well, I think mine are too. That is because my love for people says, I want to do what that person would have wanted me to do. That husband and father never would have wanted that to happen for his children and his wife. And so I don't get it. It's another one of those puzzles in life I don't get. But that is why you plan, right? It's why you plan. So your stuff, I had a person call and say, my mom had a very large retirement account. She named her husband as the beneficiary. They've been divorced for 7 or 8 years. Who gets the money? And my answer was, you probably should call somebody, but the beneficiary gets the money, right?
Yep.
So, and that's not what she wanted either. And somehow it escaped the divorce, everything, planning is so critical. And then part of, I think, Jon, you find good practice or best practice with a lawyer is not just planning once, but coming back every so often. I know you and I have talked about the client care packages. And I know a lot of lawyers that provide them. I don't. Up here, I do. I provide it, but people are kind of like, well, that's interesting. But it's so I can build a relationship. When something happens in your life, you'll think of me. We'll see each other every year or 2 years and kind of go over this stuff. You still married to George, or whatever. And it's just so critical. Or as you say, you own your house alone. But your children, what are you going to do here? You have no planning. So there's a lot more to estate planning than just, it's not transactional. It's not like once and done, right?
A lot of people think it's a one and done, and it's not, because life changes. I mean, especially if you're doing an estate plan and a trust for people, to keep things private. And, the real purpose of that trust is to keep the family out of court. At the end of the day. But a lot of people simply have a will. And even if they simply have a will, yes, they're still going to have to go through probate and do other things, but at least they're expressing what they want to have happen, guardians and those kind of things. But here's the thing. When we were going through my father-in-law's stuff, digging through boxes, I said to Michelle, I said, honey, I have good news, I have bad news. She said, well, what's the good news? I said, the good news is I finally found the will. She said, oh, that's great. She said, what's the bad news? Now, before I answer that question, he died in 2013. So we're talking 11 years ago at this point. Okay. Obviously, been an adult for a long time, as had my wife, right? So she says, what's the bad news? I said, the bad news is it looks like you have to move to Milwaukee and live with Aunt Jean and Uncle Ed.
Oh, no.
Right? That document was 40 years old. Things change. So yeah, it's not one and done. Get a plan done, put it in place. And then at least every couple of years, review your life circumstances. Things change. I mean, hey, I visit with my estate planning attorney every year because, my wife and I have 6 kids between us, and who knows, between now and next year, I might decide I don't like one of them anymore. I might need to change something.
So you spoke of, I'm sorry.
No, go ahead, Mary.
I was just going to say, you spoke of, your passion is education. Mine is as well. That's why Maya and I do these live streams, is to really educate people. And I just wanted to kind of shamelessly plug that I am doing a workshop, a lunchtime workshop. Buy your lunch if you want to come back to Michigan, Jon. But on February 4th in Suttons Bay at the VI Grill. And if you want to register, I made it try to make it easy. It's planwithmaryann.com. I was going to put it in the comments, but I was having trouble getting into the comments. But just come in and register, come have lunch with me. We'll talk about this stuff, we'll get things going. But it's in Suttons Bay. Planwithmaryann.com.
Planwithmaryann.com. All right, I put it in the comments.
And you can register. Yep.
Wow.
February 4th. Yep. So,
well, yeah, Jon might have to book a flight, come up to.
I know. Come on back up. We still have a couple of kids that are still in Wisconsin, so I can make the whole trip.
There you go. Cut across Lake Michigan, and you'll be here.
Exactly.
Yeah, I don't know if that ferry is running though right now.
Not unless they put ice skates on it.
Mm-hmm.
There you go. There you go.
What I was going to say, though, something that I think is very interesting about our conversation is both you, Mary Ann, and you, Jon, kind of got into this topic, this industry, based on similar experiences. You both went through incidents that made you realize the importance of having an estate plan, and now you are both trying to help other people. And I think for so many of us, you don't have that mindset until something like that happens to you. So what you both are trying to do is tell everyone, listen, don't go what our family or what we went through. Get ahead of it, get a plan done. And that way you don't have to be the one going through all of this while grieving a loved one and then learning, oh my gosh, if only my loved one or if only this person would have had a plan, we wouldn't be having to suffer and go through all of this additional just pain and struggle while, again, still grieving with someone.
That's
Absolutely.
Perfect, Maya. Yeah, you summarized
Absolutely.
it perfectly. Why, I know I'm in it. I'm pretty sure Jon's in it like that. And I will say that so often people that do come into my office for a plan, and there's quite a few, they're coming in because they experienced something like that in their family.
Yeah.
Sometimes they've experienced the good part, though. Hey, my dad had a trust. Everything was great. Boom, 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 boom. We're done. I want that. Yeah. Right. So I do have both happening. Mm-hmm. And that's a good thing.
Yeah. And I know for me, this is something I've shared with you, Mary Ann, but I've watched my parents go through this when my mom lost her parents. They didn't have any sort of plan. My grandma was very young, definitely didn't expect to pass away that young. And just seeing everything that my mom had to go through made me realize, okay, mom and dad, you guys, you need to have your plan together because selfishly, I don't want to have to go through all of the things that you had to go through when you guys are gone. So I know for me now, just based on seeing that and then all the things that we've discussed, Mary Ann, just how important this is. And I know that I'm going to certainly be on top of all this. And I've been telling my family too that, yep, time to get going.
I had a couple come over from your hometown the other day.
Oh, no kidding.
I did. Yep.
That's awesome.
Yep. So, and that's across the state, Jon.
Yep.
Wow.
From Alpena, Michigan.
Alpena, Michigan.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. Well, when I tell people, and you're exactly right, and people say, well, do I really need a plan or why should I plan, that kind of stuff? And I said, well, let me ask you one question. What do you want the experience to be like for your family after you die? Now, if you want to make it easy for them and, and show some love, planning, I think, is the greatest final gift you can leave to your family. If you're one of those people that has the mentality, and there are those out there that say, well, someone will figure it out. I'm dead. What the heck? So be it. But you don't realize the emotional and the financial impact that will have on your families.
It will. It will. It's very sad.
Yeah.
Well, we are running out of time. So really quick, I want to just plug Mary Ann and Jon. As always, I have Mary Ann's contact information in the description to this live stream. But Jon, if people want to listen to your podcast, get a hold of your book, maybe contact you or look into My Life and Wishes, how can they do that?
Yeah, absolutely. My Life and Wishes is www.mylifeandandwishes.com. It's our website. You can find a lot of valuable information there. In the podcast section, they can find links to my podcast, but the podcast is called Estate Planning Nightmares and How to Avoid Them, which is on YouTube and Apple and Spotify and iHeartRadio. And my book, Click Here When I Die, is available on Amazon.
All right. Well, there you go.
And if anyone has any questions for me, or anyone has an interesting story they want to share and be on the podcast, they can certainly email me at Jon, which is JON, at mylifeandwishes.com.
I'm going to put that in the comments. So
Perfect.
Jon at mylifeandwishes.com.
Yeah. And anyone is welcome to send me an email if they have questions or want to learn more. Always happy to help. I'm on a mission to help 1 million families avoid the nightmare that we live through.
It's a great goal.
So, and I can't do it alone, which is why I work with wonderful people like Mary Ann.
Yes.
It's been a great meeting, Jon. You met him very early in my estate planning career, and he just really lit my fire, more than it was lit, right? I mean, just really. So yeah, it's been great. It is great.
Yeah.
Well, so
Jon,
thank you for joining us, Jon.
Yes, thank you so much. It was so great to have you on
guys.
Ask the Attorney. We really appreciate it. And Mary Ann, I will see you again on our next episode. So season 2, episode 3 next month. And just a reminder for all you folks watching, you can always send us any questions. So, the name of our segment is Ask the Attorney. So if you have any questions for Mary Ann at any point, you can always send them to our newsroom email. That is just newsroom@upnorthlive.com. And we will be sure to answer all of your questions during our next segment. But thank you so much for joining us tonight. Oh, go ahead, Mary Ann.
I just want to point out planwithmaryann.com only has one N in the word plan.
Shoot.
Right. Don't worry, but I'm just pointing it out to the, yep.
I'm going to delete that. That's embarrassing.
No, that wasn't, it's like I didn't have my red pen out. I wasn't circling it, but I did think if people want to come, we'll get them there with planwithmaryann.com.
Okay.
Yep.
The correct spelling one should be up now. So there we go. All right, Mary Ann and Jon, thanks again for being on the show tonight. We really appreciate it. And we'll see you next time, Mary Ann.
All right. Sounds great.
Thanks,
Jon.
Take care, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.